In a race defined by good recoveries and strong performances, one driver played spoiler to the playoffs while another missed out on a much-wanted win. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, it's Taylor Kitchen and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we do motorsports media your way, talking about NASCAR literally all the time. And this was race 2 at Kansas for the year, and we had an excellent battle to the checker flag between the number 24 and the number 1. Chastain and Byron were running pretty similar lap times as the laps were winding down, and then Byron decided to change his line a little bit going into the corners, which cut into Chastain's lead. It was really close coming to the line, but ultimately it was the Watermelon Man that got the win, playing spoiler to the playoff, his 5th career win in the NASCAR Cup Series. And I gotta say, the celebration for that win was probably one of my favorites for the season. He was literally celebrating like he had just won the Daytona 500. It was incredible. I think it lasted about like 6 or 7 minutes, him just doing burnouts by the wall, by the front stretch, in the grass. It was such a fun celebration, and I know this was such an emotional win for Ross Chastain and that one team because this was a season that just got away from them, to be honest. I got to chat with him before the race at Darlington and after the race at Darlington, where they knew their fate. They did not make the playoffs, and we talked about how, you know, the Lady in Black was a track that had haunted Ross Chastain in particular and that team, but ultimately to what their hope was for the rest of the season. And he said, you know, we're not going to stop until we get a win. And of course, now this weekend at Kansas, they have that win that they've been wanting this season. So congrats to the one team. That's pretty awesome. And while that one team was able to capitalize on an excellent car and an excellent day, another driver let that opportunity slip. We're talking about Kyle Busch. In yet another what could have been race for Kyle Busch, with less than 35 laps to go, he wrecked from the lead. It looked like Kyle Busch was just trying to fill a gap between Briscoe's car and the wall, trying to get away from Ross Chastain, who was hot on his heels. After the race, Kyle Busch said he just got in too big of a hurry trying to make that work. He also said just the air just took off from his car and he went sideways. And I've seen a lot of people online blaming Briscoe for this, and ultimately, like, I don't see it. I really don't. Briscoe is a playoff driver trying to stay on the lead lap. He's going to do everything he can. In his position, he's not supposed to just move over for Kyle Busch. I don't think that would have been the right move anyways. Besides that, I think he just held his line. He ran a similar line to what he ran the lap before, and though it wasn't a lot of room, he did give Kyle some room on the top to try to make at least something happen. But ultimately, I think it was just a racing deal. Kyle Busch got too antsy to get a spot that ultimately he couldn't have gotten regardless, and it cost him. He ended his interview by saying that he feels numb and he doesn't know what to do. And I hate hearing that from Kyle Busch. It was a very raw, emotional interview, and I appreciate the candor from him. But as a positive, though, I do think that 8-car is finding speed. It's taken a long time to get there, but they're finding consistency, they're finding speed. Do I think Kyle Busch can win this season to continue a streak? I don't know. I think with Talladega coming up next week, that's a great chance for them to get that win. RCR has a great super speedway program. They've shown strength there before. So I think if he wants a chance to win, it's going to be next week, and I think that's it the rest of the season. Ultimately, we don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But again, another race of what ifs for Kyle Busch, ending in disappointment. And first, we have Ross Chastain, and second, William Byron, who was on his heels coming to the line. William Byron said he wanted this win so bad, and I understand that, but ultimately, take the second place. He's had 2 finishes outside the top 15 from Watkins Glen and Bristol, so ultimately, this is a fantastic day for the 24. It's also a statement race for this 24 team, with William Byron saying afterwards, you know, they've had a lot of BS come their way over the summer just based off of their performance, just a lot of outside noise. So being able to have this good of a run inside the playoffs, letting people know we're still here to compete, is really good. So hopefully they take this momentum and go on to Talladega, which is a pretty good track for that 24 team. Speaking of a good finish for a team that needed one, Martin Truex Jr. disappointment exiting the playoffs pretty early following the awful round of 16 that they had, but Martin led a few laps this race and finishing in 3rd. A really good day for all you Martin Truex fans to hopefully celebrate. This is where we kind of get into the recovery part of the show here. Ty Gibbs in 5th place, again, did not have a good round of 16, but recovered for a top 5 finish at Kansas to start the round of 12, though he's not in the playoffs. It's still good for him to compete and do very well. Wedged in between those 2 drivers is Ryan Blaney finishing in 4th place. And all the Penske drivers this race had loose tire issues. They brought such fast cars to the track, and unfortunately what ended a lot of their good days, obviously Blaney able to recover, was the loose tires that they had on pit road. For Ryan Blaney, the team knew that he probably had a loose tire. They were kind of unsure of if the tire was tight enough or not. He went back on track, ultimately had to make an untimely pit stop. What saved them, though, was that caution for Kyle Busch when he spun from the lead that allowed that 12 team to go to pit road, top off with fuel, then go back onto the track to get a top 5 finish. Blaney ultimately had a pretty dominant car, could have won the race or at least finished inside the top 3, so just missing that mark a little bit, but ultimately a great recovery by that 12 team. You have Alex Bowman in 6th, starting this round off pretty strong, got the 3rd most stage points out of all of the playoff drivers this race, won stage 2, so a great way to start for the number 48. Christopher Bell finishing in that 7th position, another great recovery from him. He lost out on a lot of good stage points that 20 team probably could have had. Unfortunately, though, towards the end of each stage, I think it was just driver error. Honestly, got loose going into some of the corners, slapped the wall a few times, and just missed out on really crucial points. He led the most laps during the race, so ultimately not a bad day, but left more to be desired. Same thing for Denny Hamlin, who also had a loose tire issue along with the Penske cars. That car was also really strong during the race, so left a lot to be desired for Denny Hamlin as well, but again, rallied for a top 10 finish. Then you have Chase Elliott in 9th. And talk about a rally. He started at the tail end of the field after discovering engine issues during practice. Then he got caught up in an incident on lap 1 where he caught some just slight damage to the right rear. Ultimately, it was all good and he was able to rally again to that 9th place finish. But let's talk about that incident on lap 1 because it revolves around a larger issue that we've seen at least twice in the past 3 races. On lap 1, it looks like Chris Buescher just really checked up, and he checked up into Burton's car. Burton had to go a little high, but unfortunately, Chase Elliott was already on that high line near the wall. There was just nowhere for anybody to go. The number 16 also kind of squeezed into Harrison Burton. They all collided with each other, and then we had cars wrecking. This also involved Jimmy Johnson. I swear every time Jimmy Johnson's in a race, he's just involved in an early wreck, which is super unfortunate. Legacy Motor Club as a whole during this race did not have a good day, but we're going to move past that because we want to talk about Josh Berry here. He sustained some damage to his car. All 4 tires went down, and this is where we have the issue. Because this makes 2 out of the past 3 races where we've had an issue concerning the DVP rule. You had Blaney at Watkins Glen, and now you have Josh Berry, as Josh Berry and crew chief Rodney Childers thought they could have continued the race. They just needed to put 4 fresh Goodyear tires on the car as they were all flat. They just needed to get the tow to pit road, and then they were all good to go. However, according to the NASCAR rulebook, NASCAR did not like that idea. Berry assumed that they were going to tow him back to pit road, but NASCAR dropped his window net and said, hey, you got to get out of the car. Your day is done. And if we look at the wording in the rulebook specifically, the rule says, quote, a vehicle that sustains damage from an accident or contact of any kind must go behind the pit wall or to the garage area, whether under its own power or not, will not be permitted to return to the race. And I know this has to do more with the tires, so NASCAR did specify this after the Ryan Blaney incident at Watkins Glen, saying they perceive this as if a car has a flat tire with no contact, that's looked at as a mechanical issue. But if a car has flat tires, they can't move under their own power after contact, that's looked at as something that falls under that DVP rule. So when Berry had all 4 tires go down, he could not move the car under its own power. He needed to get the lift from NASCAR. That signaled to NASCAR, his day is done. And I know this is recency bias, but I am curious if NASCAR is going to look over this rule during the offseason and maybe tweak it just a little bit. I do believe that these teams should have a chance to look over these cars to ensure that their days are absolutely done. But if they really did believe that all they needed was 4 tires and then they could get back on track and complete the rest of their race, I really do think they should have done that or have had the ability to do that. But of course, according to the NASCAR rulebook, that's not the case. And of course, we have that for a reason, making sure that these cars are safe to return to the track in a specific amount of time to fix the car. So I understand the DVP rule. I understand it. I get it. But I also think maybe there could be more leniency to allow these cars that specifically just have flat tires to get the attention they need to go back onto the track if that is truly the most egregious injury these cars have. So an unfortunate and albeit frustrating end to the race for Josh Berry and that number 4 team. I know they made some comments following their early exit from the race that I'm sure you'll hear about on TobyChristie.com. But to round out the top 10, we have Zane Smith. He's been a very consistent driver the past few weeks inside the top 15 and even inside the top 10. I know the results that he's had haven't shown that consistency, but it's been such a joy to see Spire running very well the past few weekends. And for Zane Smith, Ultimately disappointing to see that he is no longer going to be with Trackhouse as a Trackhouse contracted driver in 2025, and he will not be returning to the 71 next year with Michael McDowell taking his place. But I think that kind of lit a fire under his butt because he's been knocking out some quality performances the past few weeks. So I hope this lands him a good home, or at least this is a good audition or showing of what he can do in decent equipment to move on somewhere else in the Cup Series, because I do think he deserves another shot in Cup. Speaking of Spire, we talked about this last week, the driver swap between Justin Haley going to the number 7 at Spire and Corey LaJoie going to the number 51 at Rick Ware Racing. Well, Corey LaJoie finished the race in 15th, and unfortunately, Justin Haley finished the race in 33rd. And Justin Haley was doing a really good job until a restart. There was a massive miscommunication between him and his spotter. Haley said, quote, he said inside, and I thought he meant out. I didn't process that. I'm so sorry about that. So just a communication there in the verbiage that was used on the radio to indicate where the cars were on track between Justin Haley and his spotter, Stephen Parsons, who also competes in the Truck Series. So kind of a cool crossover there. But again, just learning a new team, working together with new people. So unfortunate there that ultimately ended what could have been a good run for Justin Haley, but a fantastic finish though in the number 51 at Rick Ware Racing for Corey LaJoie that cannot be understated. I want to talk about the rest of the playoff drivers and how the points shake out following this race at Kansas. In 13th, we had Daniel Suarez, 14th, Joey Logano, 24th, Chase Briscoe, and 25th, we had Tyler Reddick. Did not have the speed at all that we expect for Tyler Reddick to have at Kansas. Same with Bubba Wallace, his teammate. Ultimately, they were way far off from what we thought that they should be going into this race, and that ultimately hurts how his point standings are right now going into Talladega. I will also say he was held up by Brad Keselowski, who decided to stay out on old tires during one of the final restarts of this race. Brad Keselowski just dropped like a rock, and it impacted the cars behind him, having to check up. One of those was Tyler Reddick. Another one I would assume was Kyle Busch, which is why we didn't see him finishing inside the top 10 like I thought he could based off of where he came out on track following that incident. So unfortunate there. Brad Keselowski took a risk staying out on old tires. Ultimately, it didn't pay off for him, nor did it pay off for the drivers behind him. Then you go to 26th for Kyle Larson, and this was a rough race, an unexpectedly rough race for that 5 team. They had a tire go down very early in the race, catching debris, which also hurt the diffuser, having it drag on the track. So they had to make so many repairs during this race. I believe they had to pit over 10 times to just fix the car to make it aerodynamically sound. They lost a lot of downforce due to the damage on that diffuser, but they were able to salvage a 26th place finish. And the last playoff driver we got to talk about is Austin Cindric. Not a good day, of course. The loose tire issue, he ended up spinning out during the race as well. Luckily for him, he's very good at road courses with the Roval, and he's also very good at super speedways, Talladega. So though these are wild card races coming up on the NASCAR schedule, they're pretty good for Austin Cindric. So fingers crossed. But right now, if you look at the playoff standings, it's a little rough for that 2 team. Looking below that cutoff line, we have Tyler Reddick -4, Daniel Suarez -14, Chase Briscoe -25, and Austin Cindric -29. Right above that cutoff line is Joey Logano +4, Chase Elliott +4, Alex Bowman +8, and then Denny Hamlin +11. So still pretty close on points right around that cutoff line, but it's going to be a little harder for drivers like Austin Cindric and Chase Briscoe to bounce back, but it's not impossible. And ultimately, if we didn't do a points reset at the end of each round of the playoffs, Cindric would be looking pretty good right now on the points, and even then, Alex Bowman came into this race below the cutoff line on points because of the reset, and he's leaving above. So pretty interesting. With all of this said, with the playoff drama, the finish of this race all shaken out, let's talk about how we thought about this event as a whole, because it wasn't like a barn burner like we've seen in the past at Kansas, but it wasn't a bad race. It was ultimately refreshing, in my opinion, from the past 2 races we've had with Bristol and Watkins Glen. Though this race was a little messy with 10 cautions, a lot of those coming from the restarts, I did think this product was really good. The restarts, though they were messy, were really fun. We saw 3 and 4 wide racing, and the battles for the lead between Ross Chastain, for instance, with Kyle Busch, and then William Byron were really fun to watch. And what was also really fun was seeing these drivers have the ability to pass if they were stuck in the back of the pack due to an issue, like Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, Ryan Blaney. They were able to work their way back to the front. So though this wasn't an ecstatic race that we've seen at Kansas in the past, it was still really, really good. I'm going to give it a 73%, which is absolutely above the yellow line. Very refreshing from the past few weeks of racing that we've had. So what did you think of this race at Kansas Speedway? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, we are done with this episode of Above the Yellow Line. As always, go to TobyChristieCom for all of your NASCAR news. And of course, to learn more about us at Above the Yellow Line, go to AboveTheYellowLine.com and make sure you sign up for our newsletter for exclusive deals from our partners. As always, make sure to share this video with your friends and family. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And before we go, I do want to say that I am thinking about all of those that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene. The damage is done in the western part of North Carolina. The damage in Tennessee and Florida has been catastrophic and devastating. So I want to say that my thoughts are with all those impacted. And of course, if you can donate, go to the Red Cross's website and see what you can do to help out those that were impacted by this. But everyone, thank you all so much for watching this video. And until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.